for making it to the Kallos Gallery this evening. It's wonderful to see so many of you here. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Madeline Perridge. I'm the gallery director here. And just a little information about Kallos Gallery that you may or may not already be acquainted with. So we're a commercial gallery. We specialise in Greek art, but also Roman, Egyptian and Middle Eastern art. And we were founded about 5 years ago by Baron Thyssen-Bornemisza to sort of promote and encourage the study of the ancient world, in conjunction with the art trade and collectors to bring greater communication from all of those sides. I think this is our sixth.
Yeah, six, I think.
Yeah. Time with Classics Hall, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to host you again this evening, and I hope you'll have a marvellous time. I think we have a great panel of people to speak, and I will just hand you over to them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madeline. I'll just intercede for a few minutes and tell you a little bit about Classics for All. I'm Jules Mann, the Executive Director, and it's just so lovely to see a room full of donors, supporters, and teachers tonight. So welcome and thank you for hosting us, Kallos Gallery. It's been, I think the first time that we were here, we were celebrating having reached 100 schools, was it?
Yeah.
And we're quite a long way from there now in 2018. I just wanted to give you, because it's such a special audience, a little brief gallop through how we, Classics for All, we're in our 8th year, and how we grew from 450,000 to nearly 600,000 turnover in 1 year. We're aiming for 600,000 at the end of this year, and hopefully we'll make it. We're on target. But last year, at the end of the year, we started with a really nice fillip by having some core grants given to us by the Garfield Weston Foundation and Foyle Foundation. And we also participated in the Big Give Christmas Challenge for the first time. We raised 72,000, well, we matched. We raised 35,000 in 48 hours to raise a total of 70,000 to get our year off to a good start. We also had 2 initiatives that we're now getting into our 2nd year with them. And thanks to the A.G. Leventis Foundation and thanks to the Polonsky Foundation, respectively, we are putting Greek into schools, ancient Greek into schools, and we are putting Latin into primary schools. So just to give you an idea of the growth, with the Greek, we got to reach 20 schools last year, and this year we've increased that to 23. Now, ancient Greek is a bit of a hard sell, so I think that's very notable. It's beyond what we had promised the A.G. Leventis Foundation, so it's a good sign that we're actually seeing more of an appetite than we had expected. In terms of Latin in primary schools, a huge amount of appetite there. We got it into 20 schools last year and 37 this year. And that's just the schools we're directly affecting. There are quite a few other schools around those that are taking it up as well. So the Big Give project reached 37 schools this year in London. So between those 3 projects, we've reached nearly 100 schools, and then beyond that, we're expecting to reach nearly another 100 with all of our other initiatives around the country. With the funds that we were able to start with, and we got another fillip in January because Jeffrey Yeager very generously hosted a Reform Club fundraising dinner, which raised another 115,000 for us. That really gave us the engine oil to have a much more successful year than ever. And one of the things we did with that was Hillary really invested a lot of time in our regional networks. We can't create 10 Hillarys, so we have to find places and people that are in most of the universities around the country who can really galvanize the schools and get out there and get the interest and also provide the teacher training that's required to get the classics into the state schools, of which you'll hear much more when Hillary speaks to her panel. But one of the good things that has come out of that you won't see in writing anywhere is that Hillary's negotiated quite a lot of in-kind funding from the universities. So they've now got skin in the game. We've actually totted up about £80,000 coming from universities towards the program. So we are really developing in ways that we never even imagined 6 years ago, and much less several years ago. So thank you for being a part of this. It's really down to you and everyone in the room, the teachers and the supporters. And I just want to let you know that one of the impacts of it is that Classics role is growing, and will be enlarging. We're only 2.6 staff members. We are expanding next year, and we will also be moving house. We are currently in a serviced office in Covent Garden, and we'll save a little bit of money and have a wonderful new digs in King's College, thanks to Daniel Arell, who really helped make that happen. So we'll be based in academia around about January, February, and so that's our story up until now. Wish us luck for the Big Give campaign this year. It's happening between the 27th of November and the 4th of December. I won't bore you with the details. If you're interested, there are flyers dotted around, and you can visit our website. But it's a match donation campaign, and it's been very successful for us. Over to Hillary Hodgson for a talk about the Birmingham.
Yeah. And just to start off with a little preamble, which is just for those of you, in case any...
Stand up.
I don't really want to stand up, because I will if you insist, but I will sit down when I'm interviewing people. But just for those of you, in case anybody doesn't know, we were established in 2010 just to reverse the decline of teaching in state schools of classical subjects, and by that we mean ancient history, Greek, Latin. To date, we have worked with about 800 schools. Over the years, and one of the key instruments of our success has been setting up regional classics networks, which are very, very low budget, I hasten to add, and very, very good value for money. So quite often we'll be looking at hiring postgraduate classicists who can stimulate demand in local areas for classics. Because you can't take classics to a state school if the teachers or the pupils or the parents don't even know what classics are. So we have to a certain extent, create that demand, stimulate that demand and keep it going. My guess is that so far, there were some real doubters a couple of years ago. They said, oh, well, no. I remember some guy sending me an email and he said, you'll never get classics on the curriculum sustainably. You betcha. And he said, how many have you got doing GCSE? Well, there are three teachers in this room tonight who have established GCSE classics, Latin and ancient history, 3 of them, without being specialists. And we have done that by training teachers to do. And to do that, we need to work flexibly, we need to work sustainably, and it is low cost. And we have some very, very skilled trainers. And we need to invest constantly. What I'm realising is that, to be honest with you, some of the primaries we work with, we've got Latin in primary schools, it's wonderful, but then the teacher leaves. There is no turnover every single year. The teacher leaves, they get promotion. And so we're adjusting and learning all the time from our own experience and trying to train teachers to scale so that you've got an English teacher, a history teacher, a maths teacher in secondary school, all teaching Latin. And when somebody leaves, you can continue. So we're there for the long term. We're not there as a fly-by-night. We're not there to work superficially. And key to our growth has been the establishment of some really rather wonderful, high-profile, high-value, low-cost networks. And we have 13 of them. And one of our most recently established, which I have every hope is going to be one of the top dogs, is Birmingham. Russell University, and in the middle we have senior lecturer Eleanor Theodorakopoulos, notice the Greek name, who is passionate about access to classics in state schools. Universities need state school pupils to survive. They can't even get enough students from posh private schools. But if we get kids from the schools tonight into Eleanor's universities, we will guarantee the survival of classics in the state sector. And by God, there's a demand for it. And what people are realising is it's not posh, it's not aristocratic, it is accessible, kids love it. It's interdisciplinary, it's rigorous. and it costs us £3,000 for a secondary school and a grand for a primary, and a bit of top up here and then to get it going, to keep stimulating that demand. These are wonderful people. There's Eleanor. On her right, can't do that, I've got Jonathan Mortimer, who is the executive head of a school in Birmingham called Hampstead Hall. And just to my right here is Jérôme Giquel, who is a Frenchman teaching in England and a linguist. And I'm going to talk to them just informally a little bit about what they've done. And I'm going to invite all of you just to join in. You can ask anything. You can ask anything from the ridiculous to the sublime, and the more difficult the better. And I'm going to start with Jérôme, and I'm going to ask Jérôme, just to start with Jérôme, I mean, Hampstead Hall, tell everybody here about where you are, what the school is like and the demographics that it serves. Jonathan, sorry.
We're a school in Birmingham. We're situated in Handsworth Wood. If you were alive during the 80s, which I know I was, you may be familiar with the Handsworth riots and things like that. So it's an area that historically had a bad reputation. It's high levels of deprivation. So we serve a very, very diverse population. Very, very different ethnic groups come to our school. We have over 35 different languages spoken by our students. We thought, what's one more? That's absolutely fine, really. We have approaching sort of just over 43% of our students are categorised as disadvantaged, so eligible for free school meals. In terms of their arrival, so they arrive at Year 7. We have Year 7 to Year 13 students, so 11 to 18. Their prior attainment is well below the national average. By the time they leave us, it's either in line or better, so we generally make good progress with them. So in terms of our context, we're one of those schools that sit below the sort of national averages in all areas. Very high proportion of students with additional languages, very high proportion of students with levels of deprivation, and well below the national average in terms of prior attainment. And that's the context of our school.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people would say in that context they would dismiss classics as something far too difficult or unachievable for children who are arriving at secondary school, perhaps with their SAT scores below average. So why on earth have you taken the risk? What was it that prompted you to think about classics?
Well, I think it's our general philosophy, as it is with all schools, and wanting to provide the best for our students. And you talked about private schools earlier. For us, it's about providing as many different opportunities that actually more privileged children would typically experience. And we have students that probably never left their postcode. You know, they going outside a postcode of B20 would be completely alien to them. So it's about broadening their experiences, whether it's a trip to the theatre, the opera, and for us it was an obvious sort of thing to explore.
Are you personally, have you got a classics background at all?
I learnt Latin for a couple of years in school, but I have to admit my mother is an absolute advocate of classics, and I think she now thinks I've made it. That's what I learned it for. I went over to the dark side doing maths and engineering, and she now thinks I finally found the way forward.
So you had a kind of family advocate in a way, who probably made you a little bit more susceptible to all of this.
I think so, yeah, and I suppose educated me, chipped away, nagged, whatever you decree it as. And I think I'd openly admit, from my own personal perspective, any grammar I know came through the medium of Latin. Yeah. And I suppose the essence of elements of German as well, but certainly Latin, because certainly during the 80s and 90s, that wasn't really taught at school. Yeah. If you take us back to our context, we have high levels of deprivation, we have high students with very little English from our students. Well, where are they going to learn that? Where are they going to have that acquisition of language? If you're familiar with the new GCSEs, which were covered extensively in the media, there's much more reliance on language, that ability to write, that ability to use the right genre on the academic register. So for me, when approached, and Jérôme, he'll sell himself anyway later, but he's one of the most passionate people I've ever known. You know, if there's a language out there, he'd be knocking on my door saying, "Help me deliver it." You know, I think this is about our 50th introduction of different languages. We started several years ago with a very small Latin club, and very proud to say that that cohort completed their GCSE. And I remember reading, I think it was an article in the Times, it was a long paper, but I remember reading an article about Classics for All and being very interested in it, and aware that Jérôme had introduced this for a very small group of students. They were doing it after school. It was gaining momentum, there was definitely interest, and I thought, this is something that could really help us. This is something that could give those opportunities that some young people just take for granted. That some young people have that benefit of improving their acquisition to language, and that's where we approached it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, over to Jerome, because this is the man at the front line. This is the man at the church house doing the work. So, Jerome, what was it that compelled you as a teacher to kind of, how did you approach in this attempt to kind of get things going?
Well, at first, as usual, you know, I'm quite enthusiastic about things, get going, and then not really thinking where this is actually taking me. You know, just, yeah. So I got the leaflet through. It was as simple as that. From the school's classics project, said, "Oh, do you want to teach Latin as a non-specialist?" And I said, "Yes, of course I do." At the time, I was doing Mandarin. That was my little baby, and that kind of Latin kind of took over. And I just went to see John and I said, "Can I do this?" And he went, "Yeah, okay, go for it." You know.
So there's a good head teacher.
Yeah, this is, you know, but you know, I've had an enormous amount of freedom in that respect, and that is something that I've always saying that you have a little bit of vision for the languages you want to do, and then your senior leadership team is supportive. That's extremely important. I mean, going back to Latin, like a lot of people, I was talking to some people earlier. You know, I was educated in France and did Latin from the equivalent of year 9 here, or year 8. Absolutely hated it with a passion. It was just really. I mean, I've just got this memory of this extremely old teacher reciting declensions with a chalk and then throwing the board rubber at us if we didn't get it right. It was not, you know. So I did it for a few years and then kind of gave it up and really didn't think about it for a while, and until 5 years ago when I got this leaflet through and I thought, ooh, why not? And then I started thinking, actually, what would this bring to us? You know, why, you know, is this a crazy idea? Because I've had lots of crazy ideas in the past. Or is this actually something? And then started going and meeting, you know, lots and lots of classicists. And I'd like to say I've met wonderful people, such a supportive community, it's absolutely amazing. But also, it really made me understand that actually there was a real value to this subject, and that in the context of our school, like John explained earlier, it actually would make a real difference.
So can you just picking up on that, because John talks about the obvious benefits, which everyone says. Latin is a good, structured, rigorous language, and there are enormous grammatical benefits to learning Latin. But can you summarise for yourself what you think the benefits are of introducing Latin?
Well, I mean, my main job is not a Latin teacher, although I do have quite a few classes now, so maybe my job title will change, but I'm the head of languages. So I look at, you know, obviously how language acquisition in the modern foreign language is and how difficult and complicated I've found, and the children have found over I've been teaching 20 years, and the ones who do Latin have a real insight in, you know, let's say the verb paradigms, you know, straight away. I mean, I was doing this today with a class that does Latin and French, and they've really been battling with them about, you know, the ER verbs in French, and then we did the present tense in Latin today as a recap. I said, oh, hang on, I understand now why you keep changing it in French. Well, there you go. So I think, you know, it really, really, really helps them. And when I interviewed some students last year, that's one of the things they said, helps me understand the French, but also, very importantly, helps me with my English. And then this morning, I was saying John on the train, it was quite funny, they were actually insulting each other in my Year 9 Latin, saying, stop being so loquacious. And I thought, this is actually a Russian-speaking boy, it's called Anton, and he says, sir, Dylan's being loquacious again. And I thought, oh, this is actually quite amazing.
And okay, so let's get to the kids, because, you know, I mean, if you're just sitting there getting them to recite a low mass and that, and, you know, you're going to. So how have the kids responded? What do they say about their experience?
So we started 5 years ago, we're in the 5th year now. So it started as an after-school club. Quite a few kids got interested. As usual with after-school clubs, you know, people come and go. But the core group stayed and did GCSE last year. 2 years ago we sat them, they were in Year 9, and And they said, "So I think I want to do GCSE." So, okay. So shall we try? I said, "No, you know what? We've got nothing to lose. Let's try." And we did. We did breakfast lessons with bus staff provided, and after-school lessons, and they absolutely loved it, and most of them got a grade 9. So, which was my biggest surprise. Yeah, I was so amazed. And just tell you that I was out of my comfort zone sometimes. I wasn't out of my comfort zone, but would be a lie. I was sometimes. You know, in the literature lessons. Okay, guys, come on, we can do this. We can do that.
How many were there? How many were there?
So, to the GCSE, we had 4 students that did the GCSE. Now, in the meantime, you came on board and helped us tremendously, and now I have 60 students doing it in year 7.
On curriculum.
On curriculum time, yeah, and then 60 students in year 8, and then next year we'll have another 60. So we'll have 180 at Key Stage 3, and the view is to obviously offer it onto GCSE as a, I would say a proper, I think it was a proper GCSE subject last year, but not on the curriculum.
How selective are you if you've got 2 cohorts of kids in year 7? Is it top of the list? How do you select kids?
Well, I mean, obviously, for obvious reasons of staffing, although Yomani has helped us train, so all the NFL staff, bar one, we've just recruited a new one, have been trained to some extent in the Latin. So, because obviously, as we talked about earlier, if some become incapacitated of some sort or decide to go, which I'm not deciding, but at least there is some kind of continuity there. So yeah, because of the staffing and the timetable and how it works, and the Latin is part of the language provision, so I have to look at, as I head a department, I have to make sure obviously nothing suffers. So the Latin is enough, but also the MFL that they and the exposure they get to that is enough as well. So yes, I do have to do some kind of selecting, obviously, but I do have some sort of lunchtime and after school clubs as well, which are open to the people who don't have a timetable lesson. The next project, which you are helping us with as well, is Ancient Greek, which is my new challenge, and I think because I'm actually learning it myself as well. So,
I mean, Jerome has taught himself quite a lot of, enhanced his own. I think you sat at GCSE.
No, I sat AS last year, at the same time as my kids did the GCSE.
There we go. So
achieved an A.
And he got an A.
But it was nice, actually, it was very, very nice to be sitting an exam with them. We literally held hands, we compared notes, and I said, "This is how I'm learning my vocab, are you learning yours?" When I got reports from my teacher, because I was doing it at distance learning, I said, "I got 70 out of 70 in my translation." "Well done, sir." I was like, "Okay, well, why did you got 4 marks? Come on." And it really, we kind of supported each other in that. I think for the other kids, I mean, obviously this was posted on Twitter, on the website. So a few kids saying, "Well done, sir." Well done, sir. It's nice for them to see that we're always learning.
And you're obviously teaching them well enough if they're getting grade 9s. So he's an A-star student. I'm going to move on to Eleanor, and then we'll kind of bring all of you in. You can ask questions now. Eleanor is at Birmingham University. Eleanor, we talked a couple of years ago, and it took us a year to get this together, about creating a network in Birmingham. I mean, for you, what was attractive about that, and what is the point of doing that?
For me, I've been teaching at the University of Birmingham for 25 years, and this is the most exciting thing I have done in that time. And actually, I've run quite a lot of exciting things, but this has been just fantastic. So for me, it seemed like a no-brainer once we got started. We knew that there were lots of pockets of activity in Birmingham. There was John, there were other schools doing bits and pieces, and what they really needed was some kind of network or some kind of support, was somewhere, as it were, to gravitate towards. And it seemed like the department was the natural place for that. So then we got started properly, didn't we, in March of this year.
Yeah. So what does the network offer that adds value to the work that the schools are doing, or that we're bringing in?
So I think it's a range of different things. I mean, to begin with, even before we had the network, one of the things that I did quite a lot was help people to know about you.
Yeah.
I helped with a number of applications, just know, people would ring me up and they would say, I want to do a letting, what can I do? And I'd bring them into the office and help them with that. But now what we can do is be much more systematic about this. We have, I mean, I don't really do anything, but the very fabulous and talented Polly Stoker, who runs the hub, is there to keep tabs on people, to give out information, to help them with their forms, so that all people, because we know teachers are incredibly busy, right? I mean, I don't think we can underestimate how busy teachers are, how much just stuff they have on their desks every day. And I mean, we academics always think we're overworked, but I really don't think actually it's as bad as it is. It isn't, is it? So they're jolly busy anyway, so if we can help them in any way to make these things happen, then that's one of the things we do. Another thing that we're able to do is to offer a little bit of networking and support. So if they all come together, I know other hubs who have been going longer than we have been doing sort of teach meets at regular intervals. And I think it's useful, isn't it, when we've had meetings to meet other people who are teaching similar subjects in the region. And it gives a sense of momentum, it gives a sense of critical mass, which I think is really important.
I mean,
Don't feel that you're shouting in the wilderness.
Yeah, it's about getting teachers to support one another, isn't it? And I think, teachers are quite beleaguered, especially class 6 teachers, who are often in a department of a half, teaching modern languages with the supportive head, and you're on your own. So there's that kind of sense of fraternity, sorority.
So there's all that, and we're just basically a kind of physical space for that.
Yeah.
And then there's obviously some aspects of training.
Yeah.
So, one was in the department every Monday afternoon learning the week.
Yeah.
And we, one of my very talented postgrads is running that, and there's people Skyping in from Shrewsbury, because the West Midlands is it's actually quite, you don't realise, Birmingham's quite difficult to get around, and if you are running a class at 5 o'clock in Edgbaston, it's not that easy for people from all over Birmingham and the West Midlands to get to. So we're doing a little bit of that Skyping as well. So we're offering some of that specialist support. We work together with the Classical Association, which is the local branch of the Classical Association of the UK. We work with them to offer some training days for teachers and also some days for the pupils.
So basically the network is adding value to what we can do centrally by offering local, specialised, regional services that are very much tailored towards the needs. I think that's the best CPD. All of my experience tells me that the best CPD is local, it's locally sourced, it's one-to-one, and when you're dealing with non-specialists, it needs to be that way. So the modest investment that we make in these services in the university, I think, is very good value for money. And in fact, Birmingham has come up with some match funding in kind, and roughly, it's a 2-day-a-week job, often for a postgrad who's there for 3 years. It costs us about £10,000 to run that function locally. They're not on our payroll, which means that if things don't work, we can get rid of them. So it keeps us lean and mean at the centre. And what else? I mean, in terms of vision for the network, Eleanor, numbers and where have you got to so far? I mean, how many schools are we currently? You're going at a pace.
Masses. I can't remember the numbers, and I'm bad at them, so I've got Polly to write them all down for me. But it is extraordinary. We've got 25 schools at the moment.
In about a year.
In about a year. So we started in March 2018, and there are 25 schools in the network now. There have been 67 teachers trained. I couldn't believe it when I saw this.
And all for 10 grand.
All for, it's peanuts, isn't it? She says. Polly has calculated that 1,400 pupils will have had access to classics after just 1 year.
Okay.
So it's a big, of course Birmingham's a big city, right? So you'd expect. But we've got, we're doing really well. There's a lot of secondary schools. There's a lot of primary schools.
Tell everybody about the school from the Nechells. We did a launch for the Birmingham network the other week, and I went up there and did some kind of presentation.
They're just lovely. I mean, you know, there are schools, there's Nietzsche's and the other lot. I mean, there's 2 clusters of schools in the most horrifically deprived areas of Birmingham. You can't get more deprived than that, I think.
The Nietzsche's is probably in one of the top ranked wards for deprivation in the whole of the UK.
In fact, Colin has told me the numbers.
Go on,
I will tell you.
I think it was something like 85%.
It is. 85% of pupils with English as an additional language, 86%.
Is a dividend that the government pays for people with income less than about 20 grand a year per household.
So these are poor children, right? But they are in a fantastic school, which has been really outstanding.
Yeah.
Their teachers are just adorable, and they are, you know, they want to do their best for these children. They have worked incredibly hard. They're training every much. In that school, they will deliver Latin to all their children instead of French. And we've got another cluster of schools in a very deprived, very white working class, very deprived area of Birmingham as well. The multi-academy trust there. So, you know, there is a lot of activity. And I do think the little children it's very rewarding to see how much they get out of it.
What do you see them getting out of it then?
Well, I went and observed a year or 2 ago a class in a school in Walsall, which was run by Kelly Vaughan, actually.
Yeah.
Another very special person. And I was amazed at these children who were, maybe 7 or 8, they could identify a verb, but they knew what a noun was. And, you know, this fills my Latinist heart with joy. You know, they could match adjectives to the nouns that they should agree with. It was fantastic. And it gave them, I think, a sense of ownership of their language and their own culture. And to my mind, that is the most important thing.
Could I ask you just one other thing? I mean, in terms of where's kind of, what's in it for the university? I mean, why should you do all of this on the cheap?
So universities obviously have an obligation to do widening participation. So from that point of view, I mean, it is part of our agenda, it is part of our brief. I suppose as a classicist, though, what I look at the widening of the university's sort of whole sort of widening participation agenda is, it seems to me, it's not particularly subject specific. It's about widening access. There's an awful lot of emphasis on STEM subjects, which I find tiresome. And there is no interest, and we do get squeezed out, I think also in favour of the larger humanities, such as English and history. A lot of it to do with the fact that simply the sorts of students that we get through the widening participation schemes wouldn't know what classics was. That's the problem. So what we can do by working with Classics for All is making sure that they do know that, and that they know that that's an option, and that they don't have to go to university. If they can't do STEM, they don't have to go and do media studies or sociology. They can, in fact, come and do what I call a real But the widening participation agenda isn't going to make that happen, so we need to make that happen, and that's why I'm invested.
I think that there's been a bit of a campaign, I have to say, for Classics, and you can see why Ellen and I get on. The WP, the widening participation agenda in many universities, including Oxford and Cambridge, sadly, is very, very focused, particularly in Oxford and Cambridge, much to my regret, on talented 16-year-old pluses. It's too late. So one of the symbioses, if one can say that, is that our focus is on reaching young people earlier, and Eleanor's legitimate territory is a bit later, and between us we get a pipeline of kids from the Nietzsche's going to Oxford. That's the vision. What is the vision?
Well, I don't have to go to Oxford.
No, they will go to Birmingham.
Birmingham's a pretty good university. But for me, the thing you said, Jonathan, about they don't leave their postcode. So for us to get children from Nietzsche's or wherever it is in Handsworth to Edgbaston, that's like, honestly, that is as good as getting them to Oxford. Because Edgbaston is like a foreign country for them. And then they can make that extra leap.
I'm going to bring the audience in because time's cracking on, and I want you to fire lots and lots of difficult questions all of them, because they can answer anything that you throw at them. Yes, sir. Could you say your name as you are?
My name is Michael Kallos.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, Mr. Jerome in particular, about this. You get a parent of a child from a deprived area, I'll assume a minority ethnic background. They come to you and they say, apparently you offered Mandarin, you offered Latin. Mandarin or derivatives is spoken now by several billion people in the world. It's a coming country. Latin, I've not met anyone who speaks there. Why should I choose Latin and not Mandarin?
Yeah, that's exactly the question I had at the opening, actually. Why should I? And I would give them the same answer as I've been giving tonight, how Latin is going to help their child with the rest of their education. So yes, Mandarin is wonderful to learn, and I would be an advocate of that as well, but that's only looking at one specific language and one specific culture. If they start doing the classical studies, and starting with Latin, that opens so many other doors. And really, as we say, going from where you are in Birmingham to a top university, Birmingham included. And I think that's one way to look at that as well. And I think I'm always saying broadening your minds. That's probably I said that probably at least once a day at school. This is broadening your mind. You may not like it, you may not decide to carry on, but you've had the experience of it. And what I find is important, and I think that the students quite often, and when we did some little clips last year for for one of the conferences we went, they feel privileged doing it. And I think I've had some lovely cards from my students last year saying thank you so much for this opportunity, because we would not have had it without you, and thank you for sticking with us. It was ups and downs and tears and all sorts, because it is a challenging subject, and sometimes especially when you do it on top of another 9 GCSEs. There were some times where those grade 9 students said, I'm going to give up, sir, maths is taking over. So, no, come on, no, you're not giving up. And they didn't, but it was sometimes, very, very tempting. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, Matthew.
Matthew Lindsay. I'm just interested, again, Jerome, sorry, on modern languages versus, not versus classics. My wife's a languages teacher, and her frustrations around the way that the government has moved on core curriculum components for modern foreign languages. And do you feel that ultimately sort of classics will need some sort of core curriculum support, or can it survive in this sort of half existence?
I think I can't remember who I was talking to earlier, but that's something we say. Classics are doing a fantastic job. I think the government needs as well to realise that the subject needs support as well. Definitely. So I think there's a lot of goodwill and a lot of fantastic things happening, but you need the people at the top as well to realise that. And I think that there has been some interest over the last few years, but it kind of comes and goes, doesn't it?
I would say that the government is not entirely unhelpful to our agenda. I mean, for example, just as there are scholarships for modern languages, training modern languages teachers, so there are scholarships of the same value for training Latin and Greek teachers. So they are realising. I think it's not a great peg to be on, but we're on the same one as modern languages. I don't think we're in the penumbra sort of beyond that.
Yeah. I had a meeting the other week with a woman who was an advisor to the last government on curriculum reform for modern languages, and modern languages are in a parlous state, just like Latin is, like classical languages, and we were talking about trying to work in a more unified way, which we should do, because at the moment there's competition between classical languages and modern languages. The modern linguists are frightened about losing their students, the classicists are frightened about losing their students, and there are ways of perhaps taking an approach which looks at Latin as a foundation language for modern languages, and all kinds of other things that we need to explore. But that will take a bit longer, new things. Other questions? I'm going to, sorry, is it Nicholas? Yeah, is it? No.
Yes, Ernst Haverkamp is my name. I'm Norwegian.
Yeah.
I've heard that in Finland
Yeah.
they have radio programs in Latin. do you think about starting up a radio station in Birmingham teaching Latin?
I'm not thinking about something. I'll be honest. But I think spoken Latin is, it's some, it's its own discipline and its own.
Yes, but it could be a
it would be it could be fabulous. It could be
Teaching
fabulous.
from, there's a Latin Wikipedia I discovered with 50,000 entries.
We could try doing a little of that, perhaps, using
We
another
could see
vehicle.
Jerome and his
Jerome is
merry gang.
Yeah.
It's a podcast or something.
A podcast.
But it's lovely the finish.
But it's quite a drive as well, in sort of the communicative approach.
Yeah.
In some circles, saying, should we use, as we say for modern English, should we use a target language? So actually teaching Latin, using Latin, which is quite different and quite difficult.
It'd be very
to
unconventional.
do. Very unconventional. I had a teacher like that, and when I was in France, and that was very, very scary because he would ask questions. And then we'd have to answer and saying, wrong case! And then that was it, so they had to start again, but yeah, so...
It does embed it though, you have to be intuitive with this. Christopher?
I speak as a trustee and as the treasurer. We're always looking forward, thanks to Hilary and Jules and others. We've got a very good story, as Jules was pointing out, and you're part of that story. But the big question we always ask ourselves is this a bit of a flash in the pan, 5, 7 years, whatever? How sustainable is it? Can you take us through the progression, the transition, through primary into secondary, through the different stages of exams and then into university? And what's your perspective on that? Because if we're sitting here in another 5, 7 years' time, we'd really like to be able to be convinced that this is a long-term story. And from a donor perspective, and we have a number of very important donors here tonight, of all sizes. I mean, any donations, we talk about peanuts, but you probably want more peanuts. Your perspective in terms of sustainability and that transition, the journey, is really very important.
If I can start from, I suppose, our perspective, as Jerome was referring to earlier, it started up, I suppose, as almost an enrichment activity, as an after-school project. Through the significant support we've had from Classics for All, it was about, for me, if we're committed to it, embedding it into the curriculum. And that's what we've done. So we've now got it embedded into the curriculum in year 7, year 8, and then rolling into year 9. And for us, once you've got something embedded into the curriculum, it then becomes something that's viable to offer at GCSE. If it becomes a viable subject at GCSE, it then rolls into A-level, and obviously that's where applications to Birmingham University. As Hilary referred to earlier, I'm an executive principal across just a small multi-academy trust. We've got a secondary and we've got a primary. And our next phase is to introduce it into the primary. So it will become that language of choice. Now there's all manner of different reasons that we've referred to why we want to do that, but one of them is that sustainability. So the vast majority of those students come to our school, so they'll have been exposed to Latin. It therefore raises the standards, it accelerates the progress towards those external examinations. And as you progress, as you would when you introduce all new subjects, in the media studies referred to earlier, at some stage schools have to introduce that. If it's successful and there's an interest in it, it becomes a viable option for students to choose. And for us as a school, and it sounds like we've got lots of different schools in the Birmingham region committed in a similar way, we do see it as a long-term vision. We needed that impetus and that very generous support from Classics for All, but the whole purpose of that initial plan was that it became sustainable at the end of it. I think we're in that position.
I suppose if we're trying, if we're sort of the end of the journey, if you like, then I think as a discipline, obviously we have an interest in making that journey come all the way to us. But there are, for a start, I think there are different ways in which it can end. Classics has adapted immensely in this country to challenges and differences. Since the sort of mid-80s, there has been an explosion in degree programs which don't require Latin or Greek A-level, as I'm sure many of you know. There are programs in classical studies, there are programs in ancient history. There are all kinds of ways for people now, for new students, from new backgrounds, from different backgrounds, to access classics. Nonetheless, for them to get to the point where they want to do that, if we can be sowing those seeds at primary, at secondary, even if they only get to GCSE, I get a lot of students who have done a GCSE in Latin, and then their school didn't offer an A-level because it's not viable. But that interest, that love was sort of germinated at that time, and then they will come back to it. So I think we're going at it from all fronts. And yes, I do think it's sustainable. I think classics has, as a discipline, weathered an awful lot of challenges and come out still fighting. I mean, there's in fact now a growing number of classics departments in this country.
Yeah. And I would argue actually that the end goal should not just be to get, shouldn't be to get young people into university. Even if a primary school gave young people 2 years of solid classical study, that in itself would enrich their cultural reference points. I mean, I don't care whether they speak a word of Latin. If they've learned about Greek myth and they've learned about legend and they may have done a ton of Latin, that would be just as useful to them as doing a Latin GCSE. Yeah.
Yes.
Daniel.
My name's Daniel Orrells, I'm the head of classics at King's College London. I would just add to what Elena was just saying. I mean, my prediction would be over the next 100 years that an understanding of Greco-Roman antiquity will become even more central. You know, when China and India become the world superpowers in the next 100 years, in order to understand what European culture and European history is, you will have to study Greek and Latin. And we're already seeing a rise of the study of Greek and Latin, so Greek and Roman civilizations in China, in Brazil, and now India already happening. If you want to understand what it means to be European and also North American, you have to read Greek and Latin sometime, you know, and that will be crucial for understanding, you know, that will be crucial for global East and Western relationships in the next 100 years. So classical studies will have an important and very interesting role to play in the next 100 years. And you see that, you know, you've got Michael Scott's article in your newsletter. So what the future of classical studies is going to be at both primary, secondary and university level will be very interesting.
Just to add on the skill set, the teachers that are trained, you know, I'm going to be around Harry Tom 72 now teaching, so that's like 40 years more at least.
David teaches in a school in Walthamstow, which is not dissimilar in profile to Hampstead Hall in Birmingham, and has done exactly the same thing.
I'm the head of English, and the investment that I've got put into Latin and Greek to train myself into the position I'm in now, that now permeates through my English teaching. So that is a benefit to me as an English teacher, and I know it's a benefit to the other teachers that are teaching as well. You cannot do the subject and not become a better teacher. It's the single best piece of training I've ever received for my subject, and it's not to do directly with my subject. It wouldn't come under English CPD, and it's to transform my English teaching.
Yeah, the underpinning. I think we'll take 2 more questions, and you can mingle upstairs, because I think we're supposed to be out of here by 8, and you can have a chance to pick on anyone you like and be brutal. But are there a final couple of questions or anything else, or are we happy to? Sorry,
I keep changing my question because it keeps being asked by other people. My name is Judith Torr and I teach with David at Kallos. I have a question for Jonathan, which is really about, in today's very, very overcrowded curriculum, what did you do to get your classics on the curriculum? Because it does really, really matter to have it timetabled. So what did you do? What did you take out? Or did you add some extra hours on?
We haven't added any extra hours in, and when Jerome talks about what we did, it was very important that other things didn't suffer. So it does come through the vehicle of the MFL allocation of lessons, isn't it? Because you feel it really can support that. For me, it was a massive advantage to have Latin on the curriculum because of the what we see as the advantages of how we're going to develop it. As you were talking about, your colleague was talking about in terms of the English aspect of it. You know, that's where we see it. So it is a commitment. The challenge, I'm being honest in terms of the question I answered earlier, the challenge will be when we get to that stage about offering it in the curriculum time at Key Stage 4. and that's going to be very problematic. The curriculum has been squeezed. We were talking earlier with some people about, it's very, you may have read it in the media recently about the number of students studying subjects such as arts, and music, and drama is really diminishing as there's an over-reliance on the EVAC subjects. Now, clearly, classics, Latin in particular, is one of those subjects, but you have to have that financial viability to have it on there. So we haven't taken anything out. It was about balancing how we can ensure it's delivered in that need.
So you're doing it as a kind of carousel of languages then, is that how that works?
No, we basically, when we talk about the sort of selecting, I had to be selected because I didn't have any extra hours to play with. So I had to ensure that the groups that were going to do it had enough MFL as well, but obviously were able enough to cope with well, more language, but less time.
Less contact time.
Yeah. And it was quite obvious that when I first started, Latin was quite limited, and I thought that's not quite enough and need to increase that because that's not going to be sort of sustainable enough. But yeah, because I mean, and what Jonathan is saying about the sort of Key Stage 4, as a head of languages, I certainly would not want them to do Latin instead of. Yeah. So that's a dialogue we'll need to have at some point. You know,
it's a divine balance.
I think it needs to be in addition to, as well as, because they complement each other so well. I know some schools have gone down the route of some kids not doing MFL at all. I would not support that at all.
No.
That's
and as a modern linguist, neither would I. It's this tightrope. I want to thank my excellent panel of people here. They really are fantastic. I get a very strong feeling that they're going to be the super hub for classics for all. You know, they've only been in existence 2 minutes and they're already making great strides. Please have a drink, ask us anything you like, and thank you very much for listening and contributing. Thank you. Thanks very much. Really good.